Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. So, what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, let's talk about the Rehimi case. So, if you didn't know what the Rehimi case was, it was a chance that it was a case that was tried in the Supreme Court. And it was a chance to get rid of red flag laws or felons in possession of firearms. Now, it was exactly the wrong case, if you ask me, because it had a guy that was kind of a jackhole that didn't deserve to have a gun and probably shouldn't have had one. And they ruled in favor of him not being able to have one, which in essence gave us a black eye in the 2A community. Now, it didn't really, though. See, the number one problem with the red flag laws or prohibiting people from owning firearms if they were criminals is if they're a repeat offender or they have that mark that we all know that you have for some of us people in the 2A. We know they shouldn't own firearms. He was kind of one of those guys. And the language left in this, we're going to be fighting in the opinion that is, or the ruling that is, for the rest of the 2A fight that we're in. Because they're basically saying that they absolutely do have the right to prohibit certain people from owning firearms, which the 2A is for everybody. And I've talked about the redemption arc of getting people that have, are nonviolent offenders that have felonies. They should be allowed back in. Case in point, look at Trump. He is a felon now, and he's not allowed to own firearms unless something changes. But this also goes to the point of cannabis use. And now, I have been clean about this for a long time. I tried to start a cannabis business. It didn't go very far. You have to use the product, and I like my guns too much to continue to use products like that or to have anything like that in my life continually. But with it being pretty much the law of the land, just like concealed carry is, there are 31 states that now allow cannabis use legally. To me, just like the concealed carry piece, you should be able to carry throughout the United States, or you should be able to use this just like you would alcohol. Now, the same thing goes with alcohol and cannabis. I don't think you should be on the substance while you're carrying a gun, meaning that if you're high or drunk, it's probably not a good plan to be carrying or using a firearm. That's just common sense. But in today's society where we have a lack of common sense, that's not necessarily, universal. If you look at what came out with Jon Stewart went on a gun rant about how it's so easy to get firearms. And that all the guys on the right are all about just flooding the street with illegal firearms and, military-grade weapons. Now, I've said this, and I'll say it again. My weapons are better than military-grade. I make sure of that. If you go talk to a military armorer, you'll find out that military-grade is not that great. It means that they've been beaten to hell. They've been pressed into service time and time again. Mine are new, and mine are in very good shape. So I first take issue with that mine are military grade. They're better. 1. 2, I don't have fully automatic weapons. I can't, because we haven't been able to have them since 1986. You can have them if you go through the hoops of getting one and paying the exorbitant fee to have one, and first to purchase one, then paying the $200 tax stamp, getting on the legal registry to where they can come and take a look at your firearms or take a look at any of the ones that you have, go through the process of registering yourself, so on and so forth. This should be a universal right. Once you're an American citizen, that is part of the 2A as far as I'm concerned. The way the Founding Fathers put it was the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. At the time, they're talking about historical precedents here. They're talking about having citizens armed to the same degree that the military is, so that if they had to stop tyranny, they could, whether it's foreign or domestic tyranny. And if you've lived in the last 5-10 years in the United States, you know that there is definitely a push towards tyranny here. The tyranny of the majority is what's ranking in the United States, and it's kind of terrifying because there's so much talk about how the United States is a democracy. We're a democratic republic, and there's a reason why we have that republic in our name, because the minority still has rights, and you can't take their rights away just because you have the majority. That's why democracy is crap. Being an ANCAP nowadays, you definitely see that there are people that march towards that beat of total democracy. Well, what happens in a democracy? Your rights are taken away from you, and the majority get to dictate what goes on. That's the same as if you had an apartment and you allow your roommate to come in, and they're now part of that democracy, right? So they help make household decisions. But what if they bring in somebody that they didn't tell you and they add them to the lease because they're part of that decision-making process? Now there's two against you, and those two decide that you're going to pay for everything, and they're not, because that's what a democracy is. That is flawed. That is flawed philosophy, and that's not what our founding fathers ever wanted. They wanted the minority to be able to stand up to the majority and say no. They wanted everyone to have their rights in black and white. That's why they put them in the Bill of Rights. It was to make sure that everyone knew their rights as an American citizen. So, what do we got going forward? I'm going to tell you, the fight continues. It looks like unless your state passed through their legislative branch, the pistol brace rule or the bump stock laws, I should say, at that level, you're fine. Those are now legal in the United States. They're legal throughout the land. I believe that the next case the Supreme Court's going to take is probably going to have to be the pistol brace rule, because while that should have shut it down, the ATF won't take the W, or take the L, I should say, take the loss, because they didn't win there, take the loss and accept that they can't make law without going through the legal legislative branch. But that's not how the ATF works, so expect a bigger fight. What else has been going on in the world? That's about it. If you're watching the history of the world right now, basically the happenings that are going on in the world, Russia's using 3,000-pound glide bombs in Ukraine. I don't believe that it'll ever be a time where Ukraine can actually beat Russia. You're talking about a military force that at its best is like 2 to 3 million versus 8 million. There's no math there. The Russians are fighting with a Soviet stockpile of 60 years of tanks and munitions that the Ukrainians are going to have to chew through, and even with Western munitions, we can't supply them with enough for the Ukrainians to actually win inevitably. So to me, I see it as inevitable that the Russians will win. It'll be a fight, and we can continue to supply the Ukraine with arms and munitions, but at what cost? I understand that there's a lot of people, including myself, saying, why are we sending stuff to Ukraine right now? And I think the only thing that makes sense to me is that if we do not stop the Russians in Ukraine, they will continue on to Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, Romania. Those are NATO allies. And by treaty, unless we have some sort of change of government in our own country, we're bound to defend them. That was set up in the Cold War era when we were afraid of the Russians invading us. The Fujin, another thing I saw that I think those of you who listen to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union would be interested in. The Fujin, if you don't know what the Fujin is the Chinese quote-unquote super battle carrier, or aircraft carrier, super aircraft carrier. Well, it is a diesel-powered carrier. It's not a nuclear-powered carrier like ours. Ours have dual nuclear reactors. And ours can turn inside of 500 meters, meaning that they can turn on themselves 180 degrees within 500 meters. They can turn around. That makes them way more maneuverable than what was reported today. The Fujin can turn at 3.4 kilometers. So if you don't understand the math there, that's 3,400 meters, where the United States carriers can turn in 500 meters. That means that they're less maneuverable, easier to spot. That also means that since they're diesel, they're going to have a hell of a lot more supply ships with them than ours were. Our carriers, if we had to sail in infinitum, as long as they were resupplied with food and fresh water, they could go forever. That's just how they are. So I don't put a lot of stock in the Chinese being able to stand up against our super carriers, despite what the world likes to say. The Chinese missiles aren't also that great either. That they're anti-ship missiles. So they're, number one, they'd have to pinpoint the carrier. They'd have to use third-party relay satellites because they don't have their own for targeting information. So while I see a huge disruption in the world that's coming, where the United States has finally decided we're tired of the forever wars and we're trying to take care of ourselves, we're focused more in on these cultural war issues politically, and the gun issue has become a cultural, political pawn, just like abortion. It's a wedge issue that pushes us aside from one another. Those of us that are concerned with our rights definitely side with the 2A guys and the freedom of speech guys. I've made my stance on abortion. I think abortion's murder, personally. I don't think it should be banned. But the reason why I don't believe it should be banned is there are repercussions for everything. And you will get repercussions when you go to heaven or you go to hell. In the afterlife, you're going to have to make atonement for what you did in your life. And that's not for me to make that decision for you or you to make it for anyone else. So that should be something that should be going along with this. Whether you own a firearm or not, it should be a free choice thing. That is part of America. So I'm going to keep it short tonight because it's Sunday and I'm just trying to get something out to let you guys know what's going on in the world. That's basically all that's going on in the 2A world right now. The fight continues. I'll let you know if there's anything more pressing or anything cool that's going on. I haven't seen any new guns that have come out that have stroked my fancy. I got to talk to my brother last night, and I probably have some stuff to be selling at a gun show soon. Not firearms, more ammunition type stuff. I've been helping a few friends learn about reloading. I'm still planning on doing a series about reloading, getting in depth with it, what kind of knowledge you're going to need to get before you jump into it. I'm hoping to get Lance from Go Rogue Industries in on that as an interview so that I can just give you some more knowledge, not just solely mine. Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, be great.